Hello and welcome to today's author webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Charlotte Moore and I'm part of the Learning and Content Management team. Joining me are my colleagues Anitha, Chandni and Radhika. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. If you haven't yet, please take a few moments to complete the poll you will see on your screens. During the session, if you have a question at any time about the content of the session, please use the Q&A option on the bar at the bottom of your screen to send your question directly to us, and the team will be on hand to answer your questions during the session. We'll also cover some of the questions at the end of the session. And you may wish to enable live transcripts via the bar on the bottom of your screen. For the best view, you may wish to drag the central bar on your screen to the right to enlarge the screen that we're sharing. And finally, our session is being recorded and you'll be sent a link when the recording is ready. So let's take a look at our agenda for today. We're going to start by walking you through the author submission process and looking at all the steps that are part of that process in Editorial Manager. Do note that the steps may vary depending on journal configuration and the type of article that's being submitted. As part of that process, we'll have a look at how to use the declaration tool when submitting a manuscript. Elsevier's declaration tool quickly and easily helps authors create a comprehensive declaration statement, which adheres to the ICMJE standards. That's the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. This declaration tool will help you produce a statement in line with these standards in Word format that can be uploaded alongside your manuscript and will appear in your published article. And finally, we'll provide you a brief explanation of the various editorial statuses your submission may progress through in Editorial Manager. So let's move to Editorial Manager and explore the author submission process. Today, I'm going to be using our training site for the demonstration, and I'm using dummy users and dummy submissions. So the training site is a great replica of the live environment, but it won't be exactly the same as your profiles and your live environment. So don't worry if you see things today that you don't normally see. This will just be due to the rights and permissions for your role and for your journal. And as we go through the submission process, I'll try and allude to those areas where things might look a little bit different in your live environments. Okay, so let's switch over to Editorial Manager now. Okay, so you'll see that I've got Editorial Manager open and I'm on the author main menu page. So this is where you start when you first go into the system. And when we're talking about submitting a manuscript, before we even get going in Editorial Manager, you'll need to check the instructions to authors, also known as Guide for Authors, which is here, available via this link on the top bar of Editorial Manager. And you'll also find it through the journal homepage. So there are instructions there that will contain guidelines on manuscript word counts, file requirements, graphic requirements, and other important information for your submission. So it's really important that you go there first and you really familiarize yourself with everything that's required before you start your submission. And when you're happy and you're ready to go, then you'll be clicking on Submit New Manuscript. If you have submissions in process, you'll be able to pick them up and continue, or we can start a new manuscript. And you'll need to select the file type. This is where you'll see the file types that are available for your journal. And if you're submitting to a special issue, you'll see those here. Please be careful to select the right one. Have a close look at the title. There may be more than one special issue in progress. And your journal at this point may also ask you to link to your ORCID record. You can do that now, or you have another chance to do that a bit later in the process as well. Click Proceed, and we move on to the Attach Files step. So this is the part where you're going to be uploading your documents as part of your submission. And the way to start that process is to either click Browse or drag and drop your files. Clicking Browse allows me to pull files from my laptop and it will start to upload that for me. And once it starts that process, you'll see that we have a drop-down menu now, and this tells us all of the available file types that we could upload as part of our submission, and anything with an asterisk is mandatory. So obviously a manuscript is going to be mandatory, so start with that one. You may also see that declaration of interest is mandatory for some journals, or it may be optional. I'm just going to upload this quickly now, and we're going to come back and talk about how to create the declaration of interest file in a moment. So we'll look at that in a lot more detail, but I'm going to upload that now. And then I'm also going to upload a cover letter. And that, again, may or may not be mandatory for your journal. If you are uploading a cover letter and there isn't any guidelines in the guide for authors, then a cover letter is a simple, brief letter designed to introduce your manuscript to a prospective editor. So if you're creating one and you haven't got any guidelines in the guide for authors, you may wish to include some of the following items: any special considerations that should be given to a paper, a brief background regarding the research or data involved, details of any previous or concurrent submissions, and it's also useful to provide any information that will support your submission, so any original data, relevance, topicality, for example. And when you've uploaded your files, you'll see that they're listed here, and conveniently they're listed in the order that the journal specifies, so the system will automatically order them for you. You can drag and drop them manually using the grab option on the left-hand side, but actually it's a really helpful option that the system just puts them in the right order for you. Check that the item has the correct file type, and you can update that with a drop-down list, and also the description. You can edit this, but please don't put any personal identifiers in here. And when you've uploaded all of your files, you can click proceed. And we're now going into a bit more information about the submission and about the data as part of your submission. And these bits will be quite journal specific. So you may be asked to select your region of origin and a section or category. And you'll see anywhere where the red triangle appears is something that needs your attention. It means there's either missing information or there's information that is required. So for this example, we're required to add some classifications. Now, classifications are set terms selected by the journal that you can choose from according to which ones apply to your manuscript. So you select the ones that apply, click add, and you've created your list of classifications that apply to your manuscript. Click submit, and it will add those to your submission here. And remember, the difference between classifications and keywords is that those classifications are set for the journal, but your keywords are the free text, and you'll see where we add those a little bit later in the process. Click proceed, and we move on to our review preferences stage. So again, this will depend slightly on the journal requirements. You may be asked to request an editor. You may have the option to suggest reviewers. This may or may not be mandatory. And you just enter their details. You'll at least need to provide their name and institution details, and also their email address. And then the save icon is the floppy disk icon, which is a bit of a throwback from the past. It's at the top there. You can save this record, or you can save and add another if you've got a couple to add. That makes that process flow nicely. So I've added that reviewer. And you may also have the option to oppose reviewers. And again, it really depends on your journal configuration about what options there are to you here. Okay, clicking proceed. Just a note on those review preferences that we just saw, they are just suggestions. So it's not that the editor will definitely use or not use them. They are just suggestions from you as the author. And then we have additional information. So this is a questionnaire that the journal uses to collect useful information, and you just need to respond to the answer as appropriate. And click proceed. And now we're on to the manuscript data step. We're on to the comments step. So these are comments that are just part of your application, but not part of your submission. So they will go to the journal office only. So you could add anything in there that you feel might be appropriate and click proceed. And now we're on to the manuscript data step. And the system may automatically pull some data from your manuscript file automatically and pre-populate these fields for you, which is a time-saving device. You will need to go through and check and verify the data that's been pulled in, or you'll need to enter the data manually if it hasn't been pulled in. And anything with a red asterisk is a mandatory field. And you can see here is where we have our keywords. So this is where we have free text, as opposed to the classifications, which were the set list that we had to choose from. And then you can add any co-authors in this stage, and you'll see that there's a red triangle here telling me that this author that I'm working as today has some missing information. So I'm going to go in and edit this profile and see what information is missing. And I can see that here it's telling me the contributor roles are missing. So I'm going to open this up, select the appropriate contributor roles for the lead author and click save, the floppy disk icon again. And this profile is up to date now. I'm going to save that and return back to here. And then I could also add another author. Again, you'll need to provide their name, email address, and it's important that you provide the institution when you're adding authors. This is because you may be able to have society or institutional discounts that could reduce your article publishing charges, for example. And you can see that there's some help text here with the I icon to help you find your institution from the drop-down list. And again, add the contributor roles. Save and return, or save and add another. So when you add co-authors and you submit your manuscript, they will receive an email notification from the journal to let them know that they've been added. You can easily reorder authors here as well. So if you're just adding lots of people in and you just want to put someone up to the first author, you can do that using the drag and drop on the left-hand side there. Okay, clicking next takes us to funding information, and you can choose a funding source for your paper. So if you know the name and the acronym, you can type the details in here and save, or there is an option here, funding information is not available, which you can tick, and that will allow you to progress to the next step without the system telling you that there's missing information at this point. Okay, so we can see on the top bar here that I've progressed through the submission steps, and I've got a green tick on each of these steps, which means that I've completed all the necessary information. I'm on the last page here. I could save and submit later. So I could save what I've done and I could come back to this. And if you remember at the beginning, when I logged into the main menu and I clicked submit new manuscript, there were the manuscripts that were in progress. And there's also a file in your main menu that says incomplete submission. So you can save it and pick it up later from your main menu. But I'm going to build my PDF for approval now, and we're going to progress this paper through to submission. Okay, so this is the final page, and it does take a while for the PDF to build. So this is the paper that I've just been working on. You'll see that it's not quite ready yet. This is one that I made earlier, just to make sure that it's available for us. So you'll just need to go through this page. It will keep refreshing as it's trying to put together your PDF for approval. you will need to read the ethics in publishing and the Elsevier terms and conditions that are contained in this link and confirm that you accept and agree to them. And you will also need to view your submission. So clicking on View Submission will open up the PDF. And you can view it from here. If you then want to make changes, you can go back at this stage using Edit Submission. But if you're happy to, you can click Approve Submission, and that's the final step in the submission process. So I click Approve Submission. And then now, because I didn't enter my ORCID information at the very beginning, I have got that chance to do it now. So there's a reminder here. I could go ahead and update my information, or I can proceed without my ORCID ID. Confirm that you want to approve the submission, and your submission is now submitted to the journal for consideration, and you'll receive an email notification that that has happened. Okay. So I'm going to return to the main menu, and that paper that I've just submitted is under submissions being processed. Okay. So we're going to look at the declaration tool now in more detail. We saw it very briefly when I was going through the submission process, and I'm going to go back there now and we're going to have a look at it together. You can also access the declaration tool through the Instructions for Authors guide. So if you're clicking on that link, you can go there and access the tool. But I'm going to pick up a new manuscript. And I'm just going to go to the Attach Files page because that's where that tool lives. And I'm going to pick it up from there. Okay, so you'll remember that we were here and we were uploading files. And then on the left here, there's a bit of information about Declaration of Interests. So whether or not it's a mandatory file type for your journal, it is a very important it is a very important document from an ethics perspective. You must declare any financial support, personal relationships, any influences you've had that may be a conflict of interest. So it's worth going through this process, and the fact that the tool helps you put it together so easily is really nice. You can use this tool and have confidence that you've created a thorough declaration of interest that meets those standards that we talked about earlier. Okay, so clicking on the link opens up this page, and this is where you'll find a bit more information about the declaration of interest, why we do it, what sort of things you should be thinking about when you're creating this. And you'll see at the bottom we have the option to start my declaration. You may see the option that you can click I have nothing to declare. And if you are 100% confident that that's the case, you could use that and just say that you have nothing to declare immediately. However, you will see as we go through this process that it's very simple to work through the steps and just say that you have nothing to declare at each stage, but you know that you've been through the steps and you've been thorough. So I would recommend clicking on Start My Declaration. And I'm just going to take you through the steps now. So research support for this reported work is where you would declare any support you or any of your co-authors received from third parties since the initial conception of your research. You don't need to list academic institutions or public funding sources, but do think broadly about any support you may have had. And as I said, it's you and your co-authors. And you can fill in the details with the organizational name and whether they've given financial support or non-financial support. And you will also need to say who received that support. You can also add multiple funding sources at this point. But if this doesn't apply, then you can just toggle this off, and using that signifies that you didn't have any support in this way. You'll see here that you can save the declaration for later. So you can start this process and you can come out of here and you can go back in within the next 30 days to continue if you use that option there. Otherwise, you can click onto the other support. Relevant support outside this reported work is where you should disclose if any of you or your co-authors have any financial interests or personal relationships that are related to the subject matter, but not directly related to the manuscript. And this is where we really think about a holistic view on this declaration statement. We're not just talking about the manuscript now, we are talking about you as authors and outside of your work on the manuscript. The time frame for this is within the last 3 years. So again, you would enter the organizational name, the author who's had the support, a bit more information about what's been happening. So you can see an example here is board membership, funding or grants, for instance. And you can also declare other relationships at the bottom. And if there's nothing to declare at this stage, you can toggle off for here as well. Anita, everything okay? Was there anything I needed to edit at this point?
All okay, Charlotte.
Okay, great. I just thought I had someone trying to talk to me then, but okay, everything's all right.
Yeah, it was me. I think, yeah,
okay.
I just lost your voice. I'm sorry. Yeah, you can just continue.
Okay. Hopefully I've been with with everyone. Thanks, Anita. Let me know if that happens again.
Sure.
Okay, patents and intellectual property. So this page allows you to disclose any relevant patents, copyright licenses to you or your co-authors. And again, enter the author name that it applies to, the patent information, add multiple, or toggle off if there's nothing to declare at this step. And then moving on to other activities. This is the final page where you enter information. You can submit any other information that a reader could perceive to have influenced the work that's not been covered in the previous pages. This is free text into the box. And again, you can toggle that off if there's nothing to declare there. Okay. And then we can review the declaration. So this point would be going through, checking you've given the information correctly. You can go back and make any changes, or you can submit and download. And at this point, it will give you the option to enter your email address and get a passcode to save your declaration. And that will allow you to return to it again within the next 30 days if you want to go back into it. Otherwise, you can just download a declaration without saving it. And you'll see that it's downloaded on the left-hand side there as a Word document. I can now save it onto my computer, and then during the submission process, I can upload that as part of my files at the attach files step. So you can see that that did take a bit of time, and it's really your call whether you want to do that as part of your submission process, or whether you think you should go to the Guide for Authors, access the declaration tool, and get your document ready before you start. You know, you could start and obviously save it and do this as part of your submission process, or you may prefer to get this sorted. Perhaps you've got a lot of information you want to put into here, so you may prefer to do that first. And then when you do your submission process in Editorial Manager, you've got absolutely everything you need. Great, okay. So we've talked about the submission process and we've talked about the declaration tool. I'm going to move on now, and we're going to talk about how to track your submission once you've started. I'm just going to return to my slides for this, but one thing I did want to say at this point is that we are going to be sharing a survey with you at the end of the session, and it would be really great to have your feedback. So I've got a few more minutes of presentation, and then we'll have some questions, but before you go, please do fill in the survey, and I'd be really interested to hear from you about what we've just seen. Was that helpful? What were we missing? Was there something else that we could cover? We've got people on the call, a mixture of people who have started their submissions and who have already completed submissions. So I'd be really keen to hear from all of you, basically, about how you found the webinar so far, so we can improve going forward. So thank you in advance for completing the poll. Okay, let's move on, and we'll go into the final part of our session, which is tracking your submission. And don't forget that the Q&A option is still open. So if you have any questions that you want to send to the team, then please use the Q&A field and the team will be able to deal with your questions from there. Okay, so tracking your submission. This is obviously a really important part. You've made your submission and then you're basically waiting for word, for progress, wondering what's happening. What I want to do in these next few slides is talk you through the statuses that your manuscript will go through. And there's a few other resources that I want to talk to you about as we do that. So when you finished writing your paper and you submit it to the journal, the system will show the status of the manuscript as being manuscript submitted. And we saw that we did that process today. And then based on the workflow of the journal, the editorial office or perhaps an editor performs a technical check on your manuscript. And they'll be checking for things like manuscript word count, format and figure quality. And this is one of the reasons it's really important to use that instructions for authors or the guide for authors as a resource before you start your submission, because that will just make sure that when you get to this point of the technical check, your paper is correct and everything is fine and it can progress to the next stage. The next step after the technical check will be assigning it to either an editor-in-chief who will then pass it out to associate editors for handling, or it may go directly to an associate editor. Journals usually have multiple associate editors who are experts in a particular topic within the broader subject area of the journal, and your manuscript will be handled by the editor who has the highest level of understanding and experience with your paper's research topic. And the status will remain with editor at this point until the editor either makes a decision or invites reviewers. And the handling editor has several options at this stage. So they'll be conducting an initial screening of your paper and assessing it against several criteria. So whether it's novel information, its priority, its scope. And if they feel that your paper is actually a better match for another journal, you may be offered a manuscript transfer. Or it could be possible that your paper does not meet some of the assessment criteria, and then the editor will reject it before peer review. So that's called a desk reject. And at this stage, that is a final decision. There isn't a chance to edit and send it back to the editor. The reject decision is final. And if you wanted to still progress your manuscript, you would have to significantly make changes and then resubmit as a new submission. But that's quite complicated. So yeah, just the reject decision is a final decision as a rule of thumb. If your editor decides that your paper is a good match for the journal, it has merit, it passes all the kind of assessments criteria that they've set out, then they will identify 2 or perhaps 3 independent reviewers, depending on your journal configuration, depends on how many reviewers they will invite, and they will send them an invitation to review your manuscript. And at this point, when the editor invites reviewers, the status of a manuscript changes to under review. It's worth saying at this point that the status remains under review while the editor works to secure the number of reviews required. And this could mean having to invite several reviewers who decline before finding those who accept and go on to complete the review. And the process of finding appropriate and available reviewers can take time, as well as the time it then takes the reviewers to complete the review. So it's worth understanding the wider setting there of a paper, of the status being under review, is that the reviewers have just been invited. It doesn't mean that we've necessarily got all the reviewers that we want or that they have even started their review yet. So hopefully that insight into the other side there will help you understand if your manuscript is under review for a while. Once the required number of reviews are received, then the status will become required reviews complete. It's a bit of a tongue twister. And that's when it's back with the handling editor at this point. So the reviews have come in, the editor will be carefully studying those reports. In an ideal situation, they will go on at this point and be able to make a decision. It could happen that there are conflicting reviews, or perhaps there's not substantial enough review content. So the paper could go back to a reviewer. The editor's got the option at this point to reopen the review. So your paper might go back to the under review status. And if that happens, that's what has happened. It doesn't mean there's something bad with your paper. It just means that the editor needs a bit more information from the reviewers. But when the reviews are completed, the editor has the information they need, they can begin the decision-making process, and that's when the status will change to decision in process. Now, the decision may need to be confirmed by more than one editor, so it may be that an associate editor has made an initial decision, and then the workflow of the journal means that they pass it back to the editor-in-chief, who ratifies the decision and then notifies the author. So the decision in process status can have more than one step to it. So if you feel that it's been there for a while, it may be that it's passed back to the editor-in-chief. They have a high workload, they've got a lot of decisions they need to ratify, but the initial decision has been made. So when the editor makes the decision, the author will be notified, and the decision will fall into one of these broad categories. Although the decision terminology may vary slightly from journal to journal. So one option is that the editor asks for a revision. So the paper will come back to you, you'll find it in your author main menu, and they've asked for some changes to your submission. And you'll find details of the changes required and the deadline for your revision in the decision letter that's emailed to you. And this decision type is an example where you may have some journal-specific terminology. So you may find that you're asked for a minor revision or a major revision, for example. The second option will be a completed decision, which will be an either accept or reject. And I mentioned earlier that the reject is a final decision term, as an accept decision is. So that means the submission process has been completed. And in the case of an accept decision, the manuscript will begin its production process, and you'll receive further information about that as it starts to happen. We talked earlier about an editor thinking your paper might be suitable for another journal. And in that case, the decision term would be transfer pending. It means the editor has rejected your paper from this journal, but has recommended your submission be transferred to another journal. And that's via an automatic article transfer service. And you'll be offered the transfer, and your response will be needed. Your response will be needed before this process proceeds. But once you've received the offer and you've made your decision and you have accepted to have your paper transferred, then your paper will move to another journal, and the final status with this journal will be submission transferred. We've also published a short video guide, which is a submission status explainer, and it looks at how your submission progresses after being submitted. And we're going to put that video link into the chat section for you now, and we're also going to share it with you in our follow-up email. I'm also pleased to talk to you about a new tool that we have launched in the last few weeks, and this is an additional tool to help authors track their submissions. It's called Submission Tracker, and we've introduced it to more than 2,000 journals now, and we expect it to be available to all journals soon. And what happens is that once a journal is using Submission Tracker, an email is sent to the corresponding author when the first reviewer is invited to review their submission. And as you can see from the screenshot, the email contains a link to the Submission Tracker landing page. And that's where you can go to view the status of the review process of your submission. And the link will stay the same throughout the submission process, and you can also share it with co-authors. And this is a screenshot of the landing page. And so from here, this is where you can, save that link, share it with your co-authors. You can go in and you can monitor your submission as it goes through that review process, with a bit more transparency and clarity about what's actually been happening and things. It gives you some dates, kind of the last review activity, the number of reviews completed, the number of invitations accepted. So in Editorial Manager, where we looked earlier and the status would say under review, it doesn't give you much more information, but actually this submission tracker tool will give you more information about, perhaps we've had, you might see that there are lots of review invitations sent, but only one has been accepted. So you'll know that we're waiting for those reviewers to accept their invitation. So that's a really good tool. We're really pleased to introduce this, and I think you'll enjoy using it. It certainly gives a lot more transparency. And as I said, we've rolled it out to over 2,000 journals. So we're it's live with most journals, and if you haven't got it yet, then you can expect to see it soon. So this brings us to the end of our webinar today. Thank you very much for listening. After this session, we're going to send you an email that will contain some helpful links. So we're going to send you the webinar recording. We're going to send you some short video guides that relate directly to the topic today. One of them is about the declaration tool. One of them is about tracking your submission, and one of them is about the author submission process as a whole. So please do look out for that email. And as I mentioned earlier, when we finish, please take a few moments to complete the short survey that will appear on your screen when the session finishes. The feedback is really helpful to us. I'm really interested to hear your comments about what else you would like to see in these sessions, what might make you attend another session, for instance, other topics that you would like to have some help with, and what your favourite bits were, what was really helpful today. It'd be really good to know those things. So thanks very much. Okay, we're going to keep the call open just while we finish up. I don't think we've got any open questions. I can see that the chat has been quite busy. Thanks very much for all your nice comments. Okay, I think we've answered the questions, so we will close the call shortly. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.